I've had people tell me who are literally talking about having suicidal feelings on my sofa that they've never told anybody. They say, but people come up to me all the time and say, gosh, I wish I had your life. You get so much done. You're so active. You're so energetic. You're so, you've got it all together. You've got a great family. And here they are, they've never worked through some kind of childhood or perhaps early adult trauma. And they've just kept it all very, very, what the term I use is rigidly compartmentalized. They pushed it, shoved it away. And then they look like they seem to be loving their life. And a lot of it they actually are. It's not that these people have created these lives that they don't sincerely appreciate or enjoy or love. They do, but it is the way they are living their life. There is intense pressure. There's intense, if there's an expectation out there that someone has of me, I must meet it and or exceed it.
Hi, everyone. It's Beth, your favorite therapist, or at least I hope I am, and host of Quiet the Clock. I am so excited to share the secret of my glowing skin with all of you. Lumine Face Pro. This amazing device has completely transformed my skin, and I've noticed a real difference in tone and texture in such a short amount of time. Lumine Face Pro uses advanced microcurrent technology to gently stimulate your facial muscles, promoting collagen production and improving skin elasticity. I mean, amazing. The device is also equipped with LED light therapy, which helps reduce wrinkles and fine lines and promotes cell regeneration. Hello, so perfect for this 43-year-old mama. I need every ounce of this. With regular use, Lumine Face Pro can help you achieve a smoother, brighter, and more even skin tone. It's so easy to use and safe on any skin type. Invest in your skin and experience the difference with Lumine Face Pro. Visit blumine.com today to learn more and order yours. Use the code QTC at checkout to get $30 off your first order. I mean, what a deal. $30 off your first order. I hope you guys run to blumine.com and get yours and love it as much as I do. Welcome, Dr. Margaret, to Quiet the Clock. I'm really honored to have you here today, and I want to share with the audience of how we were connected, which is kind of random, but just to share, as a licensed mental health counselor, we have a requirement to do continuing education credits every 3 years to renew our license. And I think it's obviously a wonderful thing because there's so much to be continuing to learn and grow as a clinician. And so as part of that, I took one of your courses, and it honestly was probably one of the best continuing education courses I took. It was just, it was really real. It was really engaging. It was really, really interesting. And it was topics that we hear about, which we'll explain a lot, but not in the way that you have put them together. I hadn't heard before. And the way that you talked about them. So,
well, frankly, Beth, when I started writing about what we're going to talk about, which is perfectly hidden depression, I never intended to write a book. I think I've mentioned that in the training. I was quite happy being a therapist in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I never had aspirations of being an author or a podcaster or anything, a TEDx speaker. But this topic, I wrote about it just very casually one week, and it just exploded. And so when I realized that I couldn't find anybody who put those ideas together. I mean, Brene Brown we'll talk about it in a minute, but she put several things together. I mean, she's brilliant, but I thought there was a step further that we needed to go. And so, it didn't exist. So I decided it could, and if I could do it, I'd do it. And
you're doing it.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm here.
So what we're here to talk about is what you've coined perfectly hidden depression, and how perfectionism masks depression. But I just wanted to comment on kind of how in life, sort of our work, our life kind of dictates the direction of our work. Like I never thought I'd be doing a podcast about quieting the clock and societal timelines and expectations and all of that. And it's so interesting to hear for you. You have over 30 years of clinical experience, and your work it sounds like your work puts you in this direction of focusing more on this.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm 70 years old, which I look at today.
No, you don't. Oh my God, you look amazing.
Yeah, you can cut this out if you want. Politics is not, I'm not very happy about it, and I got pretty upset last night. But anyway, enough of that. You may feel great about it, so we don't need to discuss that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it has brought so much meaning to my life. I mean, the last decade, I thought I'd be, retiring and, going on Carnival cruises or something. I don't know what. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to construction workers and speaking here, and I'm again, the TEDx was just a complete surprise, and I just feel it has so enriched my life, and because I feel so passionate about this message.
Yeah. And while I was doing your training, again, I was just so intrigued and excited to be learning what you were sharing. The reason I thought it would be perfect to have you on here, and again, I'm so grateful, is that one, I work with a lot of perfectionists, and two, we've had a lot of guests on here that are perfectionists, kind of like overachiever, type A, and sort of the struggle of being that type of person and not being able to control sort of these timelines of partnership and parenthood, if you want that. And so but then again, hearing you kind of talk about perfection as this camouflage to depression, I just thought the audience would really benefit from learning more about it. And yeah, so if you can just start to share, I guess even what you started to see in your work, that you wrote a blog post, and kind of the blog post was the catalyst of the years ahead of this work you're doing. Can you share more about what you wrote and the response to that?
I knew so little about computers and writing, and that when the post went viral, I thought something was wrong with my laptop. It kept making these funny noises, and I had to ask somebody, what is going on? Yeah, it was back in 2014, which seems quite a long time ago now. And I was thinking about the people that I had seen in my office that would have vehemently denied that they were depressed. In fact, they would say, oh my gosh, I have way too many blessings in my life to be depressed. No, I'm not depressed. And, so we'd go in another direction. And, but what I found out when I really connected with them and could see what they were about was that they were in really tight emotional control. And that emotional control in sort of a perfect seeming life was camouflaging their inability and actually their ignorance, not in a harsh way, but they really didn't know how to express emotional pain. They would tell me about something that was very painful, like a tornado or a rape or something they were, a loss of some kind, a divorce, a loss of a child, but they couldn't access their emotions. They couldn't feel those things. They could talk, they could say, yeah, I was really sad about that, but I didn't see any kind of concurrent emotional expression. So I picked a term out of the air, Beth. I just said, well, let's call it perfectly hidden depression. And the post was called The Perfectly Hidden Depressed Person. Are You One? And that's what went viral. Wow. And then I was writing for the Huff Post at the time, and they chose to use it. And I had forgotten that I had left my email. I was asking, people, if you know about this, would you please email me? And hundreds of emails came in a 36-hour period of time. So which really I answered every one of them. I was up till 2:00 in the morning answering emails. And people said, I've never heard of this before. How do you know about this? One woman said, I was going to hurt myself today, but I'm going to go home and talk to my family. And I was blown away. So I started looking. Again, it was 2014. I started looking and I found Brene Brown had written her first book, The Gifts of Imperfection. I read that cover to cover. And I found another book by Terrence Real.
I love him.
Yeah, he's really
love
good. It was one of
him.
his first books. It was called I Don't Want to Talk About It. And he had theorized that men's depression was different than women's depression, that men's depression was covert, whereas women's was overt. So I think he was trying to talk about basically the same thing. He was just calling it covert depression, which never caught on in the psychological field. But it's an incredible book, especially for men to read.
You know what's so interesting about you saying that? We have men on here and there, but we want more male perspective and insight in understanding if, what are the pressures they feel. I think, kind of to speak to sort of overt, covert a little bit differently, like it's pretty obvious that women's societal timelines and pressures are around partnership and motherhood. And we talk a lot about egg freezing on here, but I feel like we don't have full insight to what like men are really feeling.
We went through IVF. I had a son through IVF. And
you did? I didn't know that.
When I was 39. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was going to quit when I was 40. I said, because my husband's 6 years older than I am. Now, we were very, very lucky. And my husband, he was living in Fayetteville and I was still living in Dallas. So all of our IUIs were in Dallas. And he would laugh and say, because he would fly into what was Love Field, which was a small airport there in Dallas. And he hated doing his due that he had to do in the gynecologist office. So he would do it in the men's bathroom at the
airport.
And then hold the sperm in between his legs so it would stay warm.
Yeah.
And he would tell me, I'm so scared I'm going to get arrested at Love Field.
Indecent exposure.
Isn't that a funny story? Yeah, but I had IVF, so I know I could come back on and talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love you to.
But anyway, so what happened then was I literally thought, well, I tell my clients all the time, if something doesn't exist, and you think it should, then why don't you create it? Especially if you need it and it would be helpful to you. Why don't what would get in the way of you creating it? And we look into that. And so I took my own challenge, and I started writing about it. And I would ask my podcast listeners. No, wait a minute. I didn't have a podcast by that time. I'd ask the people that were reading my blogs to answer me and to interact with me about this topic. I would kind of write about what I thought it was. And it became kind of clear to me it was sort of like a syndrome, not a diagnosis. And sure enough, all these people started saying, I'll talk to you. I'll know exactly what this is. I'll talk to you, from all over the world.
Wow.
And in 3 months, I had about 90 people who had volunteered, and I filtered that down to about 60, did 60 hour and a half, 2 hour interviews over the period of a year. Yeah, I was constantly on the phone, it seemed. And started putting together a book of someone I had met. Was, sure enough, she was an acquisitions editor for an agent, and I had no idea that she was. She probably told me, but I didn't know what an acquisitions editor was. So, she said, I think Jim would be interested in this book, and he was, and they helped me, formulate it even more. And then Random House and all these publishers were interested in it, which was great, but they said, nobody knows who you are. They won't buy it because nobody knows who you are. That was in 2016. So I started the podcast. I thought, well, I'll show people who I am.
I'll make them know who I am.
And that was what finally there was a publishing house, New Harbinger, who said, yes, we want you to write this book. And so now I'm writing my second one for them, which is a
Amazing.
workbook for the book. Mhm.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Can you speak a little bit more? Well, I guess maybe my first question is, I think there's more understanding about classic depression and sort of the presentation of that
Mhm.
and how maybe that looks different than perfectly hidden depression.
Yes.
And how might someone know that maybe they have perfectly hidden depression?
Right. Right. Great question. Great question. First, perfectly hidden depression is not a diagnosis. I would not be so narcissistic to believe that I've come up with some diagnosis that no one else in the whole world has ever thought of. So I want to make that clear. Classic depression, as anybody in the mental health field that may be listening knows, is that there are two required criteria. There is depressed mood for usually a certain amount of time, which is a noticeable change in someone's demeanor, their attitude, their behavior. They either they notice it or other people notice it. And again, the period of time differs depending on the kind of depression and what's called or anhedonia, which is a fancy word for the lack of pleasure in things that you used to find very pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
One of those two has to be present. And, but in perfectly hidden depression, neither one of those is present. You look great. I've had people tell me who are literally talking about having suicidal feelings on my sofa that they've never told anybody.
Mm.
They say, but people come up to me all the time and say, gosh, I wish I had your life. You get so much done. You're so active. You're so energetic. You're so, you've got it all together. You've got a great family. And here they are, they've never worked through some kind of childhood or perhaps early adult trauma. And they've just kept it all very, very, what the term I use is rigidly compartmentalized. They
Mm-hmm.
shoved it away. And then they look like they seem to be loving their life. And a lot of it they actually are. It's not that these people have created these lives that they don't sincerely appreciate or enjoy or love. They do, but it is the way they are living their life. There is intense pressure.
Mm.
There's intense, if there's an expectation out there that someone has of me, I must meet it and or exceed it.
Yeah. Is there also, I imagine, the fear of maybe being seen,
You
right?
bet.
If I don't uphold this image and this perfection and
You
these
betcha.
expectations,
So you've
someone
got
might
it.
truly see me, or maybe I truly see myself.
So you've got an internal battle going on, which means maybe all those feelings you've shut behind some double locked door are beginning to seep out, and they're trying to get your attention, and so you're fighting them off inwardly. And you're exactly right. Outwardly, you are very determined to make sure that no one is going to see this battle inside
Mm.
of you. And in fact, you need to be that person who is seen as the doer, the not in a like I need a bunch of attention, but you want people to think of you. Oh, Beth is the person we need to do this. She will get it done, and she will do it better than anybody else. You're smiling like maybe you recognize
I'm
that.
telling, if I'm being really, really honest, I sat in your, and I've been having this hellish secondary infertility journey, and
Mm,
I sat in your training, and I'm like, I think I'm doing this. I think I'm doing this. And I'm not, maybe not so much in a perfectionistic way, but a productive way. Like I keep showing up. And, I'm curious too. I wanted to ask you, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but who cares?
okay.
Sort of the relationship with social media, perpetuating the perfectionism, perpetuating the image of perfection. And, if someone shared this with me, if they were to look at my social media, it looks one way and my internal being and
Yeah.
feeling looks different. Like I'm really not doing that well.
Right. No,
which,
you're exactly correct. It's
yeah.
only exacerbated. Use big graduate school word. It's only exacerbated. It's worsened. I mean, you just have a whole other avenue where you've got to put up this facade. Now, don't want your audience to think we are dissing perfectionism.
I do want to talk about that because I want to make the differentiation between, because there's a lot of different presentations of perfectionism and functions of perfectionism that maybe aren't linked to depression. So I want to, if you could talk and talk about that differentiation.
The way the researchers talk about it is they call it destructive versus constructive perfectionism. And I think the analogy I use in my courses is that if you're going on a hike and the goal of the hike is to go see a waterfall, and for some reason you don't make that, it starts raining or whatever, your kid turns their ankle or whatever it is, and you go home, then the destructive perfectionist might be heard to say, well, that was a waste of time. It's getting to the waterfall and taking pictures of it and making sure they're on Instagram that was your goal. And so instead, the constructive perfectionist would say, well, we didn't get to see the waterfall. Maybe we'll do that next time. But wasn't that a fun hike until you hurt your ankle? It was like, I so enjoyed being with you. It's much more process oriented than goal oriented. Now, that doesn't mean the constructive perfectionists don't have goals. Of course they do. We all, meeting a goal makes most of us feel, pretty positive. I mean, we've set a goal. We've wanted to have a successful podcast like you do, and we've met that goal. The destructive perfectionist will say, well, yeah, maybe I did that, but I could do better. I could do better. I could do the next thing. Yeah. And there's very little contentment or satisfaction in doing well enough. In fact, I had a woman in my office yesterday who has come in distinctly because of this. And I asked her, I said, hey, what would it be like for you to, I don't care what it is, to start out a project or a goal where you're just going to say, I'm going to do it well enough. And she just looked this horrified look on her face, like, well, no, I couldn't do that. And so it becomes such a part of your being. And then we call it, oh, I'm just productive. Or I love to stay busy. Or, my husband would say that's the pot calling the kettle black. Or we say, I'm just not a crier, that, or I don't have time for that. We say these things to ourselves to prop up and continue this, what is basically our need to stay away from any feelings we might have. And we do that with activity.
Yeah. I think it's so helpful for people to have those constructs or definitions of, the perfectionism, destructive versus constructive, because a lot of the work I do is trying to understand the function of something. Sometimes like anxiety can be helpful to some people, and there's a fear to let go of that, but sort of making that distinction of when is it harmful and when is it helpful. And I think it's great for everybody to have those terms to kind of self-reflect, bring awareness to, okay, is this helping me or hurting me? And so much of what you said too about sort of the process versus the outcome is a lot of what we talk about here. We get so hyper-focused on the outcome that we're missing, and I've done it myself, that we're missing the process, we're missing the experiences. So I love your example of the hiking. I think a lot of people can relate to that, in a kind of broader sense, that like, are we missing the whole experience because it's not exactly the goal or the outcome that we had envisioned?
And infertility is one of those things that it is so goal oriented. I mean, it is, I want a successful pregnancy. I want to have a baby, a healthy baby. And you go through a lot of shit to get there.
So much shit.
A lot. And so, it's very emotional, and it's costly in many, many ways. And it is so hard to, I remember meeting a woman in the waiting room, and I'm not knocking this, but she'd undergone like 7 or 8 IVFs.
Lots
And
of
I
feelings.
remember sitting there thinking, I don't want to be this woman, but how do I prevent that? Because I'm just as goalie. I wanted this as badly as anybody, and I was just lucky that it happened to me.
Yeah. I mean, for women that choose, I mean, no one chooses that path. I don't want to use that language.
No.
But the people that end up on that path, and that are willing to endure all of that,
Right.
it's your deepest desire. It is your deepest
Exactly.
desire. Like, it's not just some like goal of like, oh, I'd like the business to look this way, or the Instagram. It's your deep, for me. I mean, I think for most women, it's like your deepest
I
desire.
wasn't judging her at all. And in fact, since then, I mean, I was a baby in practice back then. I think I've been a psychologist for maybe 2 years, a year or 2 years. And I've seen plenty of couples who've miscarried multiple times and are still, trying. And I've been a part of it. I've said, okay, I've learned so much more since I was that baby in the waiting room, talking to this woman. And I could very well have ended up like her, except I was much older than she was. And that for me was a cutoff. It doesn't, I mean,
Yeah, I think
my
it's
child
like
was
everybody
30,
has
so
their,
so much has changed since then, but anyway.
yeah, and everybody has their boundaries in that journey for
Mhm,
sure.
mhm.
But yeah, we could definitely have you back and have a whole conversation about that. Um, I'd love to hear kind of some, if you can share some examples of, writing the blog and some people that have reached out. Was it sort of this aha moment of now I have a deeper understanding of myself? You've kind of put this language to what I've been feeling.
Mhm.
And maybe even just for the audience, some examples of what sort of perfectly hidden depression might look like,
You
or
mean
the
yeah.
perfectionist tendencies that are masking,
Yes, well,
depression.
there's again, with hopefully what is humility, I I thought about, I mean, in fact, all these 60 people that I talked to, plus my own clients that I had seen, I literally sat down and said, what do these people have in common? Are there some traits that I can identify and talk about that I think a lot of people, that they're interactive traits, they don't exist by themselves. So one of them is you're highly perfectionistic, and you have a very shaming, fear-inducing voice that's driving that perfectionism.
Mm,
I must do this, or um, I like to tell that there was this story I tell about a guy named Steve. Steve is not his real name, but anyway, he he told me this story about how his mother used to throw rocks at him and scream at him that he would never amount to anything. And that's the voice he heard all the time. You're not going to amount to anything. You're not going to amount to
mm,
anything. I've had a multimillionaire in my office that told me, you know, what I really like to do is quit. And I think he was an engineer, and volunteer my time, to and I said, why don't you do that? And he had a similar voice, he goes, I don't know how much money I have to make before I shut that voice up.
mm.
It's so sad. So that's one. Highly responsible. I mean, sort of uber responsible. Always have your hand up. I'll do it. And again, that activity tends to blur or obstruct the expression of pain. One of them is you discount pain or hurt. You deny that. You just discount it. Another
Mm,
one is you tend to think that gratitude is um, literally the what's the word I'm looking for? The basis of good living. And I also think gratitude is wonderful, but I believe in the word and. I am grateful and I'm
love
this.
that.
I am uh, I am happy and I'm tired.
Yeah.
I am this and I'm that. And they both can exist at the same time. And what the problem with feeling overly grateful is that you deny. Well, I'm saying I'm not grateful for this if I complain about it.
Yeah.
Another one is, you're generally very successful in your business because we love perfectionists. We love people who exceed goals. But you may struggle with emotional intimacy. No one really know. You don't let anybody in to who you are. You're a great listener. You're probably a really good therapist. You're a great
I
listener.
resonate deeply.
You sincerely care about these things with other people. You're always the person who remembers everybody's birthday in the office, or who does the really nice thing, the really meaningful thing when someone's parent dies. You don't just bring them a casserole. You say, let me take your kids for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You're very caring in that way. But when you stop and think about it, when your friends stop and think about it, do we know anything about her? Not really. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So there are 10 of those, and they all kind of interact, and they're not all, you don't have to have them all present, but yeah. And again, that inability to express sadness, anger, fear, disappointment, frustration, maybe frustration's okay. But it's this very rigid, tight, pressured way of living.
Mm. How have you seen people that present in this way, or do have perfectly hidden depression, do in relationships? How successful are they in relationships?
Well, guess who they tend to choose or be attracted to?
Avoidant, unavailable.
Exactly. Exactly. They are attracted to the underfunctioner, the person who wants their partner to overfunction in the relationship. They are attracted to the under-responsible, the narcissists, because the narcissist won't take responsibility. It's not my fault. It's yours. And
Mm-hmm.
the perfectly hidden depressed person will go, you're right. I should never have spoken. Yeah, I shouldn't have spoken that way. There's a grain of truth in what you're saying to me. So obviously it's all my fault. They could be attracted to someone who also is avoidant, conflict avoidant, and whose attachment style, if we want to talk attachment style, is anxious or just not, they don't attach easily. So they are Barbie and Ken. They before they went to the real world, they believe that that's what life is going to be like, and they feed each other's fear of vulnerability and transparency. The lucky ones are the people who have partnered or married somebody who might write to me and say, I think my partner has this
Mm.
or experiences life this way. How do I approach them? Somebody reached out to me, literally, it was a very poignant email. And he goes, I have been married to my wife for 15 years and I don't know her any better than the day I married her.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, those are the lucky ones because maybe they have a partner who's knocking on the door and going, who's in there? Are you in there? You can come out. I mean, relationships are complicated, and excuse me, I know I'm saying some of the things I said in the training, but it's important. Those 60 people that I interviewed, I
Mm-hmm.
asked them, why are you risking, I know your name. I could write your local paper. I'd lose my license.
Yes.
But, I remember this brain surgeon talked to me and I said, why are you talking to me? And he said, Margaret, I don't want anybody to be as lonely as I have been in my life.
Oh,
I am
yeah.
no one knows me. No one knows what really makes me tick. And so I am so very lonely.
Mm.
And he happened to be an Oriental American. I think it was Japanese American, maybe Chinese American. I don't remember. And he'd gotten bullied, and his family was, it's all about performance and success, and you don't talk about anything. And I mean, he'd had some really, really tough experiences. And he said, I'm still this walking kind of shell of a person.
Yeah.
So and men and women, can handle. This is not primarily a male thing or a female thing. I think it depends on, I mean, way too many of us have grown up in homes where we were told, I was told, when you can be nice, come out of your room. Not interested in what you're angry about, not interested in what you're sad about.
Yeah, I do think there is this like socialized component to it that we're not supposed to express, or it's not comfortable to express, or for the receiver or even ourselves. Like, I think it just has, obviously it's getting better. And I loved what you said about in your TED Talks, to like normalize suicidal thought. Like, let's normalize human pain. Let's normalize
Exactly.
the pain of the human experience. Like, it can be so painful, but I just feel like, again, we're moving in a better direction. My parents didn't go to therapy, didn't understand therapy. And
Right.
so there's this sort of like cultural, social, generational component to it. But yeah, how do we start normalizing those experiences where people then feel comfortable enough to talk about them, to not feel so
I
much
do think
shame?
I do think the younger generations, I guess older generations would say they spend too much time talking about the way they feel, and it's become, oh, I've hurt you, so there's going to be criticism on both sides, but there's a balance. And I have tended now over the years to stay away from the word vulnerability. I wrote about it a lot in the book, and now I call it transparency.
Oh, can you share more? Yeah, those are big, I
Yeah.
guess, buzzwords.
It seems to have a unsettling effect, or people going, "Oh, vulnerability is a weakness." That's in fact, when I first started writing, I had people on Facebook, I remember they said, "You are trying to pathologize courage and stoicism and getting crap done. You are trying to say that that's a bad thing." I said, no, I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing. I have a PhD because I had to have the top, I had to have the degree, well, now I don't think it's the top degree, but I did then. And so it's much more about the person. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What is troubling and what is unhealthy is when that becomes what you must have. And that is, that you must look invulnerable. And you're scared of people seeing your weakness. When I started writing, I decided to be very open about, I have performance anxiety. I have panic attacks, and I was anorexic, and I've been divorced twice and married for 34 years now. So I got that right finally. But I decided, I'm going to model
Love
transparency.
that. I love that.
And that's what you can do about it. I mean, you can model transparency. And I will tell you, I was having a panic attack writing about having panic attacks, because I thought, people are going to go, well, I don't want to listen to her. If she can't solve her own problems, why would we trust her? And what I found is quite the opposite, that as I have been more transparent in my own struggles, that does not diminish for others, maybe for some others, and I don't ever hear from them, which is fine. But, for many, it is, I like that you seem to have this balance of knowing what your strengths are and what your competencies are and presenting those, and then also being open about what you struggle with.
I love modeling. We did a whole thing on social media about the power of modeling in therapy. And I'm thinking about a session of mine with a client specifically, and I've worked with her for a number of years. So, I'm more comfortable using self-disclosure. And we started that session, and she asked me how I was doing, and I was transparent with her. And it encouraged her to be more transparent with me. She's like, and she called it, she's like, you're being honest with me and you're modeling this to me. And so I want to offer that back. And I love that session. It was like really, really powerful.
And that's when the self-disclosure was appropriate, because you
right.
got
Exactly. Because it was,
you set up the space in a way that your client can really connect with. And so that's great. Good for you. Good for you.
oh, thank
Good
you.
for your client.
What are some other ways that maybe even if someone is not in therapy and they don't have that space to have transparency modeled or to learn or have a safe space to be more transparent, how might someone start to break free of some of this perfectionism that is hiding the depression, or perfectionism that's harmful?
Mm-hmm. There are 60 exercises in the book
Oh, great.
that if that you can take yourself through, with lots of caveats. If this is too hard, you need to go into therapy. But almost from the very beginning of the book, I'll say, start thinking about someone you know that you like, that you know keeps confidences. You know, they've never gossiped about anybody with you. They've never shared something and then say, now don't tell anybody I told you that, you know. And so start thinking about that person and begin visualizing what it would be like to invite them to coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is, and to say, I really want you, if you be willing, you're the kind of person I'd like to start talking to more honestly about myself.
Mm.
I don't really know how to do that very well. In fact, I don't know how to do it at all. And that person might look at you and go, no, you know what? You never talk about yourself. And then to say, well, thank you for letting me talk to you. And the other person would go, well, wait a minute. What were you going to tell me? I just did.
Yeah, that was it. That's the start.
That's your first step, to
Yeah.
say, I don't know how to do this. That's all you have to say at the beginning. And even that, I mean, that's why therapy can be helpful, because I'm thinking of a woman right now who I started the book by talking about her. She was a young 20 something. And she said, I heard you talking about perfectly hidden depression on what was then Periscope. I don't know if you remember Periscope at all, but it's pretty short lived. And I felt kind of stupid doing it, because you were supposed to take places to people, you know, with your camera. And I thought, I can't take them into the therapy room. So I'd walk around my yard. I mean, just do stupid stuff. I went on it long. And she sat down on my sofa and she said, I just want you to talk this first session. I just want to listen. I want you to talk about perfectly hidden depression. Now, she did talk, and she looked at me, she goes, because I have to be in control of this session. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's fine with me. What do you want to know? And she actually told me a year and a half later, when she left, that she'd had a plan to take her life when she walked in my door.
Wow.
She was about to get married to somebody who was abusing her, and emotionally, physically, sexually, every way you possibly can. And she felt she had to marry him because of things I won't go into, and she was going to kill herself. So just start where you are. Just start where you are. That's all you have to do.
I think that's even if you reverse it as someone's friend, anyone that's listening, and maybe this is not specifically resonating to you, but you might think about a friend that
I
is the
bet you.
perfectionist or doesn't share or is overly responsible. And it could be a good cue to you to just check in on them or ask
Yeah.
them more directly how you're doing. And
And you know what? I would quickly say, I don't. They're not going to tell you anything if you ask them how you're doing.
yeah. But
What
maybe just be with them could be helpful, because
exactly?
like you said earlier, there is this loneliness component to it.
Exactly. I think if you make a statement, and you say something like, I just said it a few minutes ago, I've known you for a couple of years, but I don't really know a lot about you. And I just wonder, do you ever talk about yourself? And they go, no, not really. Yeah, okay. Well, if you ever want to, whatever. And so you invite, you are with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you start noticing some things, and you could maybe begin to bridge that gap of their fear. You could say, I'm real, I'm afraid to talk about certain things about myself. I never tell anybody that blah, 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 whatever it is, and, in fact, I remember moving to Fayetteville from Dallas. Fayetteville was then 50,000 people. Now it's almost 100. So relatively small.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my therapist in Dallas I would never tell anyone that I was divorced twice. I would not lie. If someone said, "Have you ever been divorced?" I'd say, "Yeah." But I would not say that my husband was my third husband because I was afraid of what people would think.
Mm.
And they judge me before they ever got to know me. And I mean, I made stupid mistakes. I mean, it was a decade.
We all do, but that's in like normalizing the human experience.
Exactly. So, it was, and sure enough, there was a woman seated on my sofa, new client. She walked in and she was crying and I handed her Kleenex and she said, "Well, I'm about to get a second divorce." And then out of her mouth came, "But you wouldn't know what that was like." Here it comes.
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
I said, "You're about to join a club I've been a member of for quite a while." And she looked up at me like, "What?" And I thought, well, okay, the cat's out of the bag. And that modeling, to use that, just being transparent with people that you trust. You're not going to be transparent with somebody doesn't hold boundaries or, isn't, does gossip or is going to go tell somebody what you told them. I mean, you don't share with that. You're not an open book to an extent where it's self-destructive, but it's,
right.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about transparency, I'm thinking also like transparency with self. And I think I'll share, more transparently here. It's really just recently that I'm more honest with myself about how I'm really feeling. So I think it can start there too. Like,
It's a great point.
yeah, like how transparent am I being with myself? I mean, it is a lifelong of like being the caretaker, not really saying how I feel. And this fertility journey has really, it's brought me to my knees and
I'm so sorry.
allowed me, thank you. It's been really hard. But there's a
Secondary
lot of,
fertility, especially, because people go, "Well, you got a child."
I know. And it's confusing because it's like, how did I have that child? Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
layers to all of it, anywhere you are on that journey. But it really is until recently where I'm really more honest about what I'm feeling, what I
Good for
need,
you.
that I can't function in the same way that I used to, that I don't have the same capacity that I used to. And I think that there is this idea that we have to kind of just keep going and keep doing and there's no time for grief and there's no time for pain and there's no space. And that's what I love what you said. I think I feel this end is so powerful because a lot of the work I do too is allowing clients to normalize and realize like you can feel more than one thing at a time and that we can make space for more than one emotion at a time. But I love this concept so much of transparency and like, I prompt listeners to think about how can you be more are you being transparent with yourself? Are you being honest with yourself? And I'll share personally that just until recently, I probably was not.
It's easy not to be. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, what are you lying to yourself about? And I can have a list at 70 years old. It's like, well, yeah, and I don't want to talk. I don't want to admit that I feel that way. And so, yeah, you're exactly right.
I think too, like, this is a lot of work I do with my clients as well, is like kind of understanding what are we using as protective mechanisms and are they actually protective? And so what is the harmfulness of destructive perfectionism? Like we have to look at that. And I love sort of your clarification of like, not all perfectionism is bad. Some of it serves, good functions, but
and the traits, as I talk about them in the book, are not bad in and of themselves.
Right.
It's the extent to which they control your life.
Right.
And, that you can never do this, or you must always do that, or you should this, shouldn't that. I mean, all those
I hate the
absolutes.
word should.
Yeah.
I hate the word should. How
So,
is one question I have is for specific to therapists, like what can therapists start to look for or recognize? Because clients can come to session and also hide.
oh yeah.
Certainly, like I was messaging with a woman, who's been in therapy for 8 years and still is not totally open with her therapist. And, as therapists, what can we start to tune into, look for presentations that might suggest perfectly hidden depression?
Well, some of that, I mean, I think the most telling factor is, listen to what they're not saying. What are they not saying? And how are they telling you things? How are they expressing fear? How are they, do you feel it in the room with them? Do you know they are feeling what they're talking about? Or are they telling you a story about how they feel? Years ago, I had, asked the questions which we all ask at, in a beginning session. Do you have any trauma or abuse in your life? And this woman had answered no. And, remind me, there's another thing I want to say to the therapist.
Okay.
And please. And, she came in like the third or fourth session and said, that question you asked me has been kind of bothering me because I said no, but there was this one time, and she was a beauty pageant participant. And so she had this beautiful smile and she was smiling. And she said, and I'm doing it. I'm not mocking her, but I am trying to show you what it was like. She said, I was raped the week before college and I just never told anybody. It was a long time ago. And I looked at her and I said, if I was videotaping this and I could turn the sound down, you could have been telling me what you had for lunch.
Wow. Yeah.
And if your client is telling you something and they're literally, there's a disconnect. There's an incongruence. We want to use the fancy psychological term. There's an incongruence between what they're saying and how they're saying it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. The other thing, and this was another point about the TEDx, don't depend on depression inventories or the diagnostic criteria.
Yeah.
Okay? That you are making a mistake, because when someone with perfectionism and this tight, rigid emotional control answers, do you ever feel hopeless? No. Do you ever think about hurting yourself? Oh, no. You're going to read, no.
Yeah.
And she's such a nice person, she wouldn't lie on this. Well, guess what? Yes, she would. And I was thrilled one time I did another interview with with a therapist who's also a podcaster. And she had read the book or seen, I don't know what, something. And she started interviewing me. She says, I've got to tell you something. I was interviewing a new client and I said, do you ever feel hopeless? And she said, no. And I asked the second question that you recommend. If you felt hopeless, would you tell anybody? No. No, probably not. So there's your window into what they don't want you to see, but they are yearning for somebody to see.
Right. I think that's true. So true. I mean, I do think the desire is to be seen and to be seen and to be understood, but there's so much fear around that. And how do you, and again, using the perfectionism to mask that, but how do you start moving through that fear?
My mother, who was absolutely stunning woman, people thought she looked like a movie star, Jennifer somebody, I've forgotten what she used to say, but anyway, she had her first panic attack when she was in her 30s. And like many women in the 1950s, she was put on prescription meds, benzodiazepines. And she became a prescription drug addict. She was an addiction. I watched her live this perfectly hidden life all her life. And so I wasn't writing. I have some perfectionistic tendencies for sure, but I've anxiety has been my problem. And that's, therapists ought to think about that too. We all should. People have said to me, well, I've always thought of perfectionism as being about being anxious, not depressed. And they're right. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety that goes into perfectionism and worry and control and all that stuff. But, what is, at least in my book, from my perspective, that we've got to start looking. And the research is all over the place. I mean, the correlations between perfectionism and depression and suicidal thinking are extremely strong, especially one certain kind of perfectionism.
Yeah, and sort of just the term is just so amazing, perfectly hidden depression. And you can think about, how many actors or celebrities have you seen
Yeah.
take their life and die by suicide? And you just kind of look and you think they have everything. How could they
Right.
not be happy or grateful or yeah, I think it's like you said, it's about more transparency and honesty and permission to feel the things you're actually feeling and not hide the things that you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ugh, amazing.
You know,
I will.
the woman I told you that had listened to me on Periscope,
Mhm.
she's now my client again. It's what, 9 years later, 10 years later. She told me some things recently that she had never told anyone. It took her 10 years.
Mm,
And I think this is her third time in therapy with me. No, her second. Um, it was amazing.
yeah,
But she, the first time she couldn't open up about that. But, she opened a lot, but not all the way.
yeah. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's such a privilege to be in our seat and hold that
Incredible.
space and be the one they feel comfortable to share with.
Incredible. Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this a long time, but I'm 10 about over 10 years for me. And every day it's still such a privilege and an honor.
It is indeed.
Well, Dr. Margaret, it's so amazing to have you here. I'm so, so grateful. Your work is incredible.
Thank you.
Any last thing that you'd want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Well, if you're listening to this, you're probably on some kind of infertility journey, or you're trying to, your clock is ticking,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wish you well on your journey and on
Oh,
your
thank
path
you.
for sure.
Thank you.
You personally and your listeners. And so it's been an honor to be here. You've asked fantastic questions.
Oh, thank you.
And I can tell you really paid attention. And so again, I want to say this work has brought incredible meaning into my own life at a time when, most of my friends are doing things, they're certainly not, I'm doing things, and I'm honored to do things, and I appreciate being asked to do things that have been very, very meaningful for me. So anyway.
Yeah. A lot of what we talk about here too is just sort of these unique, authentic journeys and normalizing different journeys. And I think you're
Mm-hmm.
such a testament to a lot of what we talk about. It's like, it's never too late to do anything. It's never too
Never.
late to find a new passion in your work. It's never too late to write a book. It's never too late to start a podcast.
Mm-mm.
And that's a lot of what we talk about on here is like, don't feel like you're running out of time, that you have to do something by a certain time. I think everyone's journey is so different and unique, and there's time for
Well, I was a
everything.
professional singer in my 20s. So I sang radio
Amazing.
and television jingles, and then had a group at night, and then I went into music therapy, and then I didn't get my PhD until I was 38 years old. So, and now at 58, I went and did this other thing. So,
Right? I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, you can
yeah,
always change courses and it's never too late to do anything. Well, I appreciate your time so much. I appreciate your work so much. And thank you so much for being here.
of course.
If you guys are like me and wanting to be more mindful about what's in your products, how many toxins are in your products, and making sure that you're putting good things on your skin and into your body, I highly recommend Osea. I did a total revamp on all my products, and this is one I have been using and now is a staple in my bathroom. I particularly love their Ocean Eyes Age Defining Serum. I feel like I don't have bags under my eyes anymore, and I just feel really good putting this on my skin, knowing something good is going on my skin and into my body. So if you want to check out Osea's products, use our code QTCPOD10 to get 10% off your first purchase. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. You You guys, I'm really excited. We just created all this amazing merch. And so if you're loving the podcast and you want to support our cause and continue to hear amazing episodes, please support us by buying some merch. I am living in these sweatshirts every day. We have a range of colors. We have hoodies, we have mugs, we have hats, we have journals. We have all of the things, and I love having them on because it's just a reminder to quiet the clock, to slow down, to like let life unfold and be happy. So there's meaning and purpose behind wearing it too, which is a nice reminder. So check out our website, quiettheclock.com, to get your merch.